Welcome to NFL World, where NFL starts and ends. I'm your host, Jacob. And we got to talk about these young quarterbacks here, at least the top two picks. As Caleb Williams looked sensational against the Jacksonville Jaguars, 4 touchdowns, 2 to Cole Kmet, 2 to Keenan Allen. And Jaden Daniels, man, this kid just keeps getting better, which is almost an unreal thing to see because he started off so good. There was no drop off on his success. He just continues to get. He was here and now he just keeps on rising. When Caleb Williams was bottom here, we saw it in week 1 he didn't play well, and then there was a couple losses in a row. He really didn't play well, and then they just started to run the football. Less throws for Williams. The protection got better. They ran with their defense, and their defense is on a tear in the last month and a half. Those are things that you need to do with a young rookie quarterback. Limit the throws, use the ground game, play with your defense. Boom. That's how you win. And the Bears have figured that out. Now, you can say that the Commanders' defense didn't look that great against Baltimore, and we will talk about that in the preview, recap really section of what happened in week 6. But you gotta give props to the Commanders to go. They went out fighting, and that's a good showing from them. It definitely deserves respect. And Caleb Williams, 4 touchdowns, like I said before. We are now looking at a second coach potentially be fired. That could happen very, very shortly. So let's move on to the Cowboys part of this because the Lions really just rolled the Cowboys. They embarrassed them on Jerry Jones' birthday. If Jerry Jones ordered a butt kicking on his 82nd birthday, he got it. Morning to Daniel. Well, really more like afternoon to Daniel. But this Cowboy team, I don't understand why people are surprised at all. I don't get it, to me. It makes no sense. You look at this team, they have done nothing in free agency the last 3 years. Haven't done much of anything. They're not aggressive. They do not attempt to be aggressive in free agency. They don't like spending money in free agency. But even this year tops that somehow. As in, you lost big against Green Bay. McCarthy has 1 year left. Do we extend him? Do we not? Do we get rid of him? Do we not? And then they decided, no, we're not going to get rid of him, but we're not going to extend him. We're just going to let him roll through the end of this contract, and then whatever bees, bees. Whatever will be, will be. And that's kind of how they operate. And that's not a great position to put your team in because that's what they did with all the coaches this year. Every coach on the staff, except maybe a handful, are on 1-year contracts. So there's no guarantee we'll be here next year. And then you ended with your wide receiver and quarterback being on their last years. Because you couldn't franchise tag your quarterback because it's in his contract. You couldn't. You could franchise tag the receiver, but that would have been very expensive in the coming 2 years. So you needed a deal done. But what happened was you waited so long that once you did pay them, free agency was gone, the draft was gone. You were in August when you finally paid CeeDee Lamb in the last week of August. There's no one around. There's all these older guys who are 36, 37 years old who don't have any more tread left on the tire. And that's what you're playing. And that's what you got. Those are great pieces to have if your team needs a leader or a guy who's just going to have a couple snaps a game and be really efficient in those snaps. That's not what they bring. But because you had You brought in Jordan Phillips, who I think is 34. You brought in Linval Joseph, who just turned 36. Those are older guys, and those are guys playing valuable snaps for you. You don't have that team. You don't. So at some point, you had to make a change. That's why the receiving core is not good enough. And props to the Lions. I really think, and this is the thing, this is the kicker. The Cowboys aren't going to beat teams who are as complete. They're going to beat teams they're not going to be able to stick with the ground game. They're going to have to go to the pass game. But like you see all the teams that have beaten the Cowboys. The Steelers didn't beat the Cowboys. The Giants didn't beat the Cowboys. The Browns didn't beat the Cowboys. What do all those teams have in common? They all have one-dimensional offenses. From the way they operate. The Browns had no Nick Chubb, so they can't run the football efficiently. So they're going to have to pass the ball. You know it. They know it. The whole world knows. The game against the Giants, they don't have anyone open besides Malik Neighbors. Darius Slayton does some nice things, but not consistently. And then they have Devin Singletary, who's been out for the last 2 games. So they're going to just either run the ball or throw the ball to Malik Neighbors. That's what they're going to do. And the last one is the Steelers. Well, they want to run the football. They want to run the football, and they will run the football. But they're not a great pass team. So you know that. And Steelers fans know it. Everyone knows that. They're a defensive team. They're going to operate by defense. Those are all teams that they are one-dimensional, and therefore we say they aren't very good. Then that's fair. That is absolutely fair. This Cowboy team, though, is the same way, and very much. As in, they can't run the football. They can't. And when they do efficiently, they're actually really good. But the problem is they can't efficiently do it all the time. They can't match physicality. I described it like this, and I'm not approving bullying in any way in saying this. The Cowboys are kind of like that team. Like you have the 49ers, you have the Lions, you have the Chiefs, you had the Niners. They had the big bully. Alright, they bully everybody, they get it through, and they're fine. They play it awesome. The Cowboys are kind of like that other bully, that little bully that doesn't even compare to them, but they still try and make the world a terrible place for anybody else. That's the way they operate. And so when you finally have the big bully go against the smaller bully, that smaller bully gets eaten alive every time. Like you're not going to consistently win that. So how do you match it? You got to match it physicality. Well, the Cowboys aren't a physical football team. They're just not. Once you take away CeeDee Lamb and say, okay, Jake Ferguson, Jalen Tolbert, Jalen Brooks, Brandon Cooks, whoever it is, beat us. They can't. They can't. This team isn't good enough. That starts with coaching. That starts with ownership. We're not willing to make moves in the offseason. That's everything. But again, props to the Lions. They played well. The biggest thing that happened for the Lions was they lost Aiden Hutchinson. Probably for the year. As he broke his tibia. He went on a sack. He got around the tackle of the Cowboys. Went to sack Dak. And you could just see it. And you can read his lips enough that he says, I broke it. I broke it. And he goes, gets put on the cart, carted off the field, and his leg is in a nail cast. And he immediately has surgery, to which they found it was a broken tibia in his left leg. That's a big loss for the Lions. That is the guy who gets pass rushes. That's it. I believe Aiden Hutchinson now has 8 sacks on the year. Him not being there is a massive issue. Because even though you won this game against Dallas, you got to play San Francisco again. You're not going to have him. You got to play, I believe you play the Chiefs again. You got to play them again. How are you going to do that? There are things that aren't happening to this Lions team that aren't efficient. They are not a good team without Aiden Hutchinson. They barely get a pass rush as it is, mostly because of Aiden Hutchinson. They are relentless, but they only get pass rush because of Aiden Hutchinson. You couldn't tell from that yesterday, but they only do. So there's a problem with this, of him not being there. It makes you already have more difficulty. Now, I saw something say, well, could we be back to the Super Bowl? Oh, I guess. I guess we've seen more unlikely things, but it without Aiden Hutchinson, it's already hard enough to go to the Super Bowl. Without Aiden Hutchinson, it might be impossible. Now, moving on to, and I was gonna label this. Actually, let's do the Drake May stuff first. So Drake May, and the Patriots are losing to the Texans. I believe the score is 41-21. It was probably the most excited I've seen a Patriot fan in a loss. Because Drake May actually did some nice things. There was 3 interceptions. I believe there was 4 or 5 turnovers. But there was 3 interceptions by him. So that's not great. But 3 touchdown passes. Not short area passes. Deep shots. He threw some nice passes. He did some nice things. Now, they ended up losing. But if you look at Monday morning and you say, well, hey, how did Drake May do? The answer is pretty well. Pretty well. He did all set. He was okay. He did turn the ball over. He was not efficient in that. He got hit a lot. But he made plays. Now the concern is this offensive line isn't very good, and how long is it going to be? Because he took some brutal shots. So that all also has to be talked about. Is how healthy can you keep him with his offensive line? Because he got beat around 2 sacks before the end of the first quarter, I think it was. First half at least. So that's crazy to think about. He got hit a lot. So can this offensive line keep Drake May up straight? Probably not, but we'll have to just wait and see. Now, moving on to what happened across the pond. So the Bears won the game 35-16 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I want to talk about this because I think this is important. Because I know everyone's talking about this, but I want to talk about this. Because this also kind of includes Mike McCarthy in a way. If this happens again, and I said this on, I think I said this on, it was definitely after the game between the Bears and the Jaguars. I said if the Jaguars lose to the Patriots, Doug Peterson is fired. Because it's not just a game in London. It's a game in London, back-to-back weeks against 2 teams. The Bears were not underperforming. Okay, that's a realistic matchup. and hard enough to win anyway. The Patriots, though, haven't looked good. That was the best they looked against the Houston Texans. If the Jaguars lose to them, Doug Peterson is fired. Probably as soon as that night. As soon as they get back to the States. Because it just won't work. Everyone looked like they have regressed. A lot. Everyone. Trevor Lawrence looks like he's regressed after paying him a big contract. Christian Kirk hasn't been playing efficiently well. ETN hasn't played well. The offensive line is a nightmare. The point is that you got people rooting for Mac Jones to come in. That's how bad this is getting. For the Jaguars, that's bad coaching. That's bad play calling. They're not. It got to a point. I don't know if you guys remember when the Bills beat Jacksonville a few weeks ago, and you saw on the sideline, here's Doug Peterson saying what Trevor's got to do or should do. Here's the play call. And you just look at Trevor and he's almost rolling his eyes. Like, how am I supposed to call this? It won't work. That's kind of where Doug is at this moment. Is there's a lot of eye rolling because what he is saying is not working. You're banging a drum that isn't making any sound, but is continuing to just try and bang it to make some sound come out of it. Something good come out from this, and that's not happening. And the same goes for McCarthy. Is he losing the team? And the answer is possibly he is. But the thing is, they're not. The offense is not good enough. From what we said before, they're not good enough, and the team isn't talented enough. And on top of all that, your ownership just doesn't care. That's what makes it worse. If there's two ways you can fix what the Cowboys are, there's two ways. You either go, and I'm talking like moves that you can make. You go trade for a pass rusher and a wide receiver, or you go sign a free agent wide receiver and look around to see if you can get a DN somewhere who's low on the depth chart or doesn't want to be. That's what you do. The Cowboys will choose a third option, which will be let's just hope it gets better. And when we get to free agency, we may or may not make a move. But by that point, you'll have new coaches, you have a new team. That's the way they operate. And that's not the best way to operate. They are not a good team by doing it. And that's if they make any moves in free agency. So let's actually grab the scores. I wrote down the scores for this week's games we had the 49ers game against the Seahawks. That game ended 36-24. Look, everyone's gonna say, "Oh, the game was closer than that." Not really. Seattle gave up 200 yards on the ground to backup running backs because Trey Mason got hurt. So you had the third, fourth, even fifth string running back because Elijah Mitchell is on IR, and so he's not playing at all this year. So the fourth and fifth string running backs are what beat you. That's number one. I don't think the 49ers looked good either, but like I said, they're like that big bully. When they go against smaller bullies, they're gonna beat them, and that's if you're the Cowboys, you have to worry about too. How is that gonna happen? Because your schedule don't get easy. And that's 49ers kind of schedule. They play the Chiefs, they play the Cowboys. Those are the next two games. I don't know if they can beat the Chiefs. Fairly certain from what we saw yesterday that they can beat the Cowboys. Next up, Texans Patriots. The score was 41-21, as we said. CJ Stroud looked good. He looked really good. He looked like he was making some nice things. The interception in the end zone is not his fault. It goes on the board as a CJ Stroud interception. It is not his fault. The ball hits Dalton Schultz in the hands, and he drops it. He tips that thing up in the air, and it gets returned. It gets interception returned 30 yards. That's not on CJ Stroud. At some point, you gotta realize that guy's gotta make catches too. Like, he's gotta do his job. He wasn't. At the Commanders versus the Ravens beat him 30-23. The Commanders they stayed in the game as best. They hanged in there very well. Jaden Daniels made some nice plays. Just they couldn't get it done at the end. And that's it. That's pretty much what happened. And then the Lions beating the Cowboys 47-9. It was demolishing. It was terrible. And it was embarrassing to see. It really was. So that's something we have to talk about too. It wasn't the way it was done. The way it was done was bad. It was the fact the Lions could have scored 60 plus, and they just stopped scoring because they put all the backups in, and you still couldn't even really beat the backups. Tells you what it is. I want to talk about this before we go. The Devontae Adams update. We've been doing this for the last few shows here, and we're going to do it one more time. Devontae Adams has not yet to be traded. He wants out, but he said according to Jay Glazer, it was called a fluid situation, as in it could happen, it could not happen. And I think really it became a fluid situation just looking at what is going on in New York with the Jets and what is going on in New Orleans with the Saints, where both teams just haven't played well. Now, the Jets have a chance to go win in there and be the first seed of their division tonight, but the Saints have lost 3 in a row. They lost 3 in a row. That's not a good team. They started good, and then it tailed off. So you see it. Will he get traded? I don't know. I think a guy who isn't playing right now wants to be traded. Maybe that changes. But also, the thing is, the price is too high. I think they said they wanted a second, which is really high for a guy who hasn't played in a couple weeks, who is an older guy, who hasn't been efficient the last few years. And then you have the fact of the Raiders don't want any of the contract, which boggles my mind. If you so badly want him gone, if he so badly wants to be gone, why would you go and be like, oh, well, we don't want to eat the contract at all? Because normally how these things work is a team will eat half the contract, and then it's prorated because you're in the middle of the year. So, for an example, Devontae Adams is on a prorated contract will make about 14, 15 million. At lowest case, 12 million from his new team. From his old team, he would make the remainder. That's how that works. But the way the contract was, like, he's on the team. For you to say, well, we don't want to eat the contract at all. What? Come on, be reasonable at some point. So, it's not just the price is too high. It's not just the player doesn't want to play. It's not just that the Raiders don't want any contract. It's everything that consists right now. So, will Devontae Adams be traded? Who knows? But it won't be at this price tag. It also might just be, I don't want New York, or I'll go to New York because I just want out, period. Could be. Let's see what happens in the coming weeks. And finally, before we hit it, I know we talked about that. Finally, before we hit it, Hassan Reddick, which has been in a weird situation last few weeks. Like, they're still a stalemate. Actually, Reddick, and this is the first time I've ever seen this, got fired from his agency. I've never seen agents fire a client. I've always seen a client fire an agent, or a client fire a lawyer. I've always seen that. Never the other way around, which is what happened. I believe the company was called CAA. I don't exactly know what that abbreviates from, but he got fired from them last week. I think it was like Wednesday or Thursday. And now he's getting represented by Drew Rosenhaus and his company. So, and Drew Rosenhaus is a great agent. He and Hassan are trying to reach, are trying to fill this chasm of space to get Hassan to New York. And he's already there. It's just, will it happen? Or will it be a trade? Who knows exactly what happens? But it looks like the stalemate might be over sooner than later with Drew Rosenhaus in the front of this vehicle. For NFL World, I'm Jacob Hebert. Out.